What's up guys, Asian here again with our first PTS patch notes video for the new DLC coming out, Harrowstorm. So this is going to be the start of what they are calling the Dark Heart of Skyrim. This is the chapter for 2020, or I should say the overarching quest line for 2020, which involves all of the quarterly DLCs and expansions. So this is the first one, Q1. Harrowstorms. This should be coming out on the based on the PTS release date, should be coming out either the last week of February or the first week of March. He gave us a March release month, so I'm anticipating it should be coming out actually on the first Monday of March, I should say. So let's go ahead and get started here. Harrowstorm is going to be a dungeon DLC, so we're getting 2 new dungeons, Icereach and Unhallowed Grave. That gives us 4 sets across each of the different dungeons, so a light, medium, heavy, and then a monster helm set. So we have 8 new sets coming in. They also did mention they were taking a look at the AoE damage over time abilities, kind of reducing the cost that they their cost, so it's a little bit cheaper to use. So let's just go ahead and take a look at what's been happening, what's going to happen in this PTS patch. So just going through the table of contents. So we get 2 new dungeons. So we have Icereach and Unhallowed Grave. So just generally speaking, just new dungeons, which means we have new achievements. So for those of you guys who are achievement hunters, who want to go for the training achievements, there are definitely going to be some of those in the new dungeons. So here are the new item sets here, starting off with Icereach. So we have Hiti's Hearth, which is the light armor set. So you have 2 Magicka regen, which already means that it's probably going to be more healer oriented. Max Magicka is the 4-piece, and the 5-piece when you heal yourself or an ally with an ability, gain a warming aura for 10 seconds. While in the warming aura, you and group members restore 1020 health every second and reduce the cost of sprint, block, and dodge roll by 5%. This effect can occur once every 12 seconds. Probably not going to be very useful for PvE because you're not really sprinting or blocking. Well, I should say you are blocking, you are dodge rolling, but 5% cost reduction to those really isn't that big of a deal for PvE content. But for PvP, this might be somewhat beneficial, especially in kind of larger groups where blocking, dodge rolling, and sprinting, you can use those a lot more often in ball groups. The exact wording does seem to imply that as will proc off of the cast of the ability. So let's say you cast Healing Springs or something, it would proc on the cast of Healing Springs. So it might not need overhealing, but we'll see how that all plays out. I'm still updating the PTS because you do have to re-download everything on the PTS for Harrowstone. So this is the patch where you have to re-download the entire game, just so you guys are aware. The medium armor set here for Icereach. Titanborn Strength, physical penetration, weapon damage, max stamina. It adds 110 weapon damage and 1240 physical pen. This bonus doubles to 220 weapon damage and 2480 physical pen when you're under 75% health. And it quadruples to 440 weapon damage and 4960 physical penetration when you're under 50% health. This is likely going to be another PvP oriented set. There are very, very few cases where you're going to be under 50% health in PvE, but for PvP, this is sort of a high risk, high reward set here. If you're able to maintain your health below that 50% threshold, you get a massive bonus to weapon damage and physical pen. So really great for PvP for those of you guys who like that high risk, high reward sort of play style. Heavy armor set is Bani's Torment. You have Healing Taken, max health, max stamina. When you taunt a nearby enemy, you tether to them for 5 seconds. While tethered, you apply Major Maim to your enemy, reducing their damage done by 30%, and you gain Major Vitality, increasing your healing taken by 30%. The tether is broken if the enemy moves 8 meters away from you. This effect can occur once every 14 seconds. This basically looks like kind of like a Vicosa, except the proc condition rather than bashing is taunting. So you get the Major Maim and the Major Vitality, so this might be beneficial for sort of harder content where your tank might need the additional damage reduction and additional healing. The monster helm is Mother Cianate, probably. Shawnate. I know Cian in Celtic is pronounced Sean, or I believe it's pronounced Sean, so Shawnate, I'm not sure. But it's Max Magicka. While in combat, casting an ability with a cast time or channeling an ability grants a damage shield that absorbs 3000 damage for 10 seconds. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. This is actually pretty weak when you compare it to other monster helm sets that provide damage shields, particularly Iceheart. Iceheart grants you, I think, almost a 10,000 damage shield. So not sure why they created this set unless it grants you a 3000 damage shield every second for 10 seconds, maybe. I don't know. Again, PTS isn't up yet for me, so I'll have to take a look at that when I do manage to get onto the PTS. Next are the 4 sets from Unhallowed Grave. Starting with the light armor set, Draugr Grip. We have Max Magicka, Spell Pen, Magicka Regen. Dealing direct damage to the enemy has a 10% chance to place a ghostly curse on your enemy for 6 seconds. Cursed enemies take 530 extra damage from all of your damage abilities. This effect can occur once every 6 seconds. So, in theory, this could have a 100% uptime. It is only proc off direct damage, so you will be limited to how you're able to proc this set. And it is a flat damage bonus rather than a spell damage bonus. So, acting more like Stone Giant than something like, let's say, Scathing Mage, for example, which provides spell damage. So overall, probably not going to be very strong in PvE, but it still remains to be seen. The 10% chance to proc also kind of lowers the overall potential of this set. Sorry for the sniffling, I'm a little bit under the weather here. We have Aegis Collar as the medium armor set. Weapon damage, stamina regen, weapon damage. When you deal critical damage with a melee ability, you summon a lesser Aegis for 12 seconds. After 2.5 seconds, the lesser Aegis spins its blades, dealing 4880 bleed damage every 1 second. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. This is a little bit confusing just based off of the wording. So does it last for 12 seconds and then it starts its bleed damage after 2.5 seconds, and then it deals bleed damage every second? So does that bleed last the entire time the lesser Aegis is out? Like, is it out for 12 seconds and you get the bleed for that would be 9.5 seconds? If so, it's actually not bad. The DPS would be 4880 DPS before any sort of additional modifier, so it might be decent. I'll have to play around with this set. The thing that kind of brings it down a little bit is the fact that you get stamina regen as the 3-piece, so you're obviously losing out on an armor set bonus. The regen might be beneficial for overall sustain, but it's not really going to be adding to your DPS. So an interesting set. The wording on it is really strange, so I'm not 100% certain how it works. So we'll play around with that once the BTS is downloaded. Heavy armor set is the Grave Guardian, max stamina and 2 max health. Summon a stone aura while blocking, hardening you and your nearby group members, increasing your physical and spell resistance by 44/30. Because this is not a unique buff, it's not major resolve or anything. It should stack on everything else. So pretty much a raw survivability tanking set, which might not be a bad set for certain groups, but for most tanking groups, probably a set you're going to pass on. Just increasing resistances probably isn't all that beneficial, as opposed to increasing damage. The Monster Helm set, Hjalmar's Nightmare. It adds spell damage, and then dealing damage with a light attack puts a bone stack on your enemy for 5 seconds. You can only apply 1 stack every second. At 5 stacks, an undodgeable skeletal hand attacks your enemy after 1 second, knocking them into the air and stunning them for 3 seconds, or dealing 14,500 magic damage if they cannot be stunned. An enemy that has reached 5 stacks cannot gain bone stacks for 3 seconds. This basically gives you an effective cooldown of 8 seconds. So it should be an 8-second cooldown. So not terrible, but I don't think this is going to be replacing Zon anytime soon. Again, it remains to be seen. This is still a pretty hefty hit here, and for PvP, this is definitely something that I can see potentially being used because of that CC effect here. But at the same time, proc off light attacks, so you will need to be able to light attack fairly often. So it remains to be seen whether this will be useful in PvE or PvP. Again, testing will need to be done on the PTS, comparing it to particularly Zon. There are 3 Cyrodiil crafted sets that they're introducing as well. Critical Riposte is located in Vistarius. You get critical resistance, max health, crit resistance. I believe this is actually the first set where we get crit resistance as one of the armor set bonuses here. You can take critical damage. You apply minor uncertainty and minor enervation to the enemy for 4 seconds, reducing their physical and spell crit by 13/14, and reducing their critical damage by 10%. They can only be affected once every 7 seconds. Unchained Aggressor, which is in Bruma. Max stamina, stamina regen, weapon damage, and spell damage, and then a 5-piece. After breaking free, you gain Major Berserk for 9 seconds, increasing your damage done by 25%. This effect can occur once every 21 seconds. Pretty interesting effect here. Not sure exactly where this would be useful. Maybe if you're like The only place I could really think of would be like Navintas. If you're the time stop person, maybe it'll help you out. I mean, 9 seconds out of 21 seconds. That's you're taking a look at a roughly be roughly 45-ish% uptime on Major Berserk, which is not terrible, but I'm not sure if it would necessarily warrant using this set. I'll probably do a little bit of math and figure out whether it'd be worth running this set over some other set for stamina DPS who might be responsible for stepping in at time stops on Navintas and Sunspire. Dauntless Combatant, which is located in Cropsford. You get max stam, max health, max magicka, max health, and then 5-piece when you're affected by a disabling effect, you automatically break free for no cost. After using this effect, you become winded and cannot re-trigger this effect for 21 seconds. Possibly useful, but that 21 seconds cooldown is actually pretty long. Might be beneficial for PvE tanks, potentially, when you're kind of learning different mechanics, perhaps. But again, it remains to be seen. I don't really see this being all that useful, but hey, some of you guys might be more creative than I am when it comes to PvP stuff, as well as for PvE. Then new collectibles and dies, new achievements and titles, and so on. Base game, they have some performance improvements, so they are continuing to improve the overall stability of the game here. So they optimize multi-threaded implementation to improve performance in situations with lots of effects. They parallelize the fixture update processes, allows them to utilize multiple cores to improve overall performance of the game client. Add additional miscellaneous CPU optimizations, optimize specific processes that could cause spikes in resource usage and causes FPS drops. So just general improvements, which hopefully we'll be able to see when this is launched on live. PTS is not necessarily a great place to take a look at performance improvements, just because there's generally less server strain on the PTS server, just fewer people on the server. So we'll see when this hits live whether these improvements actually have changed FPS values or not. Some new PvP campaigns. They're just renaming them. They're still the exact same thing. So CP non-alliance locked, no CP non-alliance locked, CP alliance lock, and then the 10 to 49. New collectibles. They have new homes, new Master Writ furnishings, new Crown Store furnishings, new Undaunted Achievement furnishings. Just a bunch of furnishings here. The prologue quest for the chapter. The Anniversary Jubilee, which should be in, I believe, March. Should be sometime in March. The template information, not much here. All template characters will have points assigned to passives in all non-crafting skill lines, so you only have to work on your active skills, so that'll be useful. Some known issues here. So not much here. Clockwork City, no big changes. Dark Brotherhood, not many changes. Dragon Bones, not many changes. Just a lot of issue fixes here. Dragonhold, not that many fixes again. Just a bunch of bug fixes, probably animation stuffs. Nothing that should affect PvE or PvP too much. Elsewhere, Necromancers. So let's see here. So Blast Bones and its morphs corpses will now last 6 seconds. Skeletal Mage and Spirit Mender and their morphs corpses will last 10 seconds. So corpses just last longer. They improved the targeting areas from all tether abilities and will now link to the corpse closest to your reticle from a much larger radius. So this is probably just trying to fix whatever is happening with Necromancer corpses. A lot of issues with Necromancer corpses and targeting corpses. Siphon, for example. Blast Bones will now attempt to leap up to 28 meters away after a short delay of spawning in rather than 15, so a little bit of a buff there. Increase the speed in which the skeleton jumps, so just a little bit faster. Reduce the cost of Boneyard. Bitter Harvest. They fixed a couple of issues with Agni Totem and Dead in Pain. They fixed a reanimate issue with reanimate, which is I believe it's the ultimate for living death. Nothing else here, just more issues fixed. Morrowind, Hall of Fabrication. Draining shock ability no longer drains magicka for those affected by the damage over time. Okay, it's a nerf. Reduced health of refabricated spears. Okay, reduced health. Reduced damage of charged gore and static cascade. Static cascade ability no longer stuns. So static cascade, if I'm remembering correctly, is the sparkles that are thrown out by the dinosaurs. The dinosaur no longer stuns. They reduce the damage. Charged gore, I'm not exactly sure in which one that is. That might be the jump move they do when you move too far away as a tank. I'm not 100% certain on that, but it seems like a nerf overall here. Pinnacle Factotum, reduce the health. Shockwave ability no longer stuns targets affected by it, so that's the giant conal that he does, I think. Refab Committee, reduce damage of melting point, that's the fire one. This damage of Fulminate and Grasping Limbs, or maybe at the point's not that. Fulminate is the Flame one, Grasping Limbs is the AoEs. Reduce the health of the Summon Ruin Factotums on veterans, so that would be the little bombers that come out. So, something general, reduce the rate at which Secret Projectiles increase in damage with successive hits. So that's probably the Execute mechanic. The Bleed from Whirling Blade now has an appropriate icon. Just in general, it just seems like nerfs across the board for halls. So this will make things like TikTok a little bit easier. Speed runs, no deaths should be easier. But it also makes it easier for newer players to get into halls. So bit of a double-edged sword here, where you're kind of trivializing older content for more experienced players, but you're also making it easier so newer players are able to get in. So I think this is, generally speaking, going to be an overall net positive to probably to the endgame community health. Just because you're getting more people able to clear the content, so you will have more interest in endgame content from a wider player base, so you'll be able to grow the community that way. Of course, it does suck that it is nerfed, so people with already have TikTok Tormentor, obviously, they are going to probably feel shafted, but I can understand why ZOS has decided to make these changes here. Murkmire, not much here. Orsidium, not much. Guildbreaker, not much. Somerset, anything here? No, nothing for here. Thieves Guild, nothing. Wrathstone, not much. Alright, comment and gameplay. So here we go. Another big chunk of stuff here. So the updated block to be calculated more efficiently by the server. Similarly to Sprint. Overall, the core block mechanics are untouched between mechanics and cost. Activating block while animating an ability or attack will now blend the animation more fluidly instead of completely obfuscating the attack. The core mechanics to block canceling remain untouched, but now display more of the previous attack's animation before your character animates the block. This just seems like sort of an animation fix here. So visual effect for block still appears as soon as block is officially activated. They fixed an issue where you could activate block when you didn't have enough stamina to actually block the next attack. You will now need to have adequate resources based on your block cost in order to activate and successfully block the next attack. Attacks that reduce your stamina to 0 continue to remove block after you successfully mitigate the effect. In some cases where a secondary effect like bleeds occur, the bleed will still be applied. This is currently not intended and will be adjusted in the future. So it seems like you will need to have, let's say your block costs 1,000 stamina. You'll need to have 1,000 stamina in order to actually raise your block. Probably not going to be a big issue in PvE, probably going to be more for PvP, where blocking is obviously a little bit more important for damage mitigation in PvP. So that's kind of where I see that kind of affecting people more often. Attacks that reduce your stamina to 0, continue to move block after you successfully mitigate the effect. Effects that normally would be mitigated via block through the scenario will no longer cancel their effects since your ability to block has been removed. So that's basically repeating the previous points up there. So you fixed an issue where using a single target charge, leap, or teleport ability would not remove targets from stealth or invisibility while you had a detection potion. No, that's an issue. Fixed an issue where many dots were gaining effectiveness of stealth bonuses. Issues where source of healing cannot be dodged or blocked. Bash now properly cancels channel abilities. Following thorns or damage return based abilities now have 7 meter range in their effects. So spiked armor, living dark snare, spiked bone armor. Summon pets will now behave more consistently with other abilities when entering deep water. Not that big of a deal. Fixed an issue where some leap and charge abilities could not be cast while immobilized. Fixed an issue where many leap and charge abilities remove your character in odd ways if you cast the ability in close range. Updated the control and responsiveness of the many charge and leap abilities so they reach fast-moving targets more reliably. Fixed an issue where many leap and charge abilities with foot apply effects. Okay, so a lot of fixes to leap and charge abilities here. Off balance will now properly update its size against the varying target dummies. Behave more consistently. Off balance now lasts 7 seconds from player source abilities and sets. Off balance is no longer reapplied to a target for 15 seconds once the original source of off balance ends. This cooldown is displayed as a debuff on targets once they are affected. That's strange. Okay. Off balance is no longer consumed on targets from heavy attacks or abilities. Note these rules may be irrelevant in some areas, such as okay. This one's interesting. Off balance is no longer reapplied to a target for 15 seconds once the original source of off balance ends. That sounds like a bug because it's supposed to be immunity for 15 seconds after it ends. So I'm not sure exactly what this means. But yeah, okay. But it just seems like they're just making off balance a lot more consistent now. It's always going to be 7 seconds. It's always going to be off for 15. So it's always going to be 7 on, 15 off. Major minor heroism will now only grant ultimate while in combat. DKs fix issue where standard first 3 ticks of standard would appear to happen instantaneously. Dragon Leap now properly animate its leap on target regardless of range. Effective scale now grants damage mitigation to abilities more appropriately. Okay, so that's just updating it so it actually protects you against abilities. Fixing an issue with multi armaments. Stone Fist, they updated its ability to improve its visual storytelling and per cast impact. Stone Fist is now a 2-part ability instead of a singular instant mid-ranged attack. Activating this ability will now stomp the earth, causing you to deal damage in an area around you after a short cast time and generating 3 charges of the ability. Activating the ability again allows you to lob one of the earth and spheres around you to an enemy from up to 28 meters away to damage them. The base ability no longer has a stagger mechanic, but instead the final charge will stun the enemy hit upon dealing damage. Stone Giant retains stagger in the form of causing the targets affected by the ranged attack to take additional damage. Decreases the damage taken per stack to 65 at rank 4, up from 45, so a little bit of a buff here. But this is a really strange change to Stone Fist. So let's go ahead and take a look really quickly at what it is currently. So currently, Stone Giant slam an enemy with solid rock, dealing X amount of physical damage and applying a stack of stagger to them for 5 seconds, increasing the damage taken by 45 per stack. Enemies who are affected with stagger 3 times are stunned for 2.5 seconds and have all stacks of stagger removed from them. So it seems like I don't know. I'd have to try it out. It seems like this wording on Stone Giant. It seems to be that it isn't removed. The stacks of stagger are not removed from Stone Giant, but you still, or I'm not sure. This is strange. So maybe this is okay. So actually, I think I know what's happening here. So when you first activate Stone Fist, you deal an AoE damage. Then you get 3, I'm guessing, stones that'll probably circle around you or something for like 5 seconds or whatever. And then you activate it again. And so you have 3 charges, so it goes bam, bam, bam. So you still have the 3 stacks. And I guess the stagger mechanic still remains at 5 seconds. So I guess in theory, I don't know. I'll have to play around with it. I don't think Stone Fist is going to be the spammable for stam decays any longer. It would really depend on how long the cast time is. If the cast time is like half a second or something, maybe you'll still use it as the spammable, but it just seems like a really weird change to have happen here. So I'm not sure how this is going to play out. To see how it works out in the PTS. Fixed an issue with Consuming Darkness. Sorks reduced the cost of Unstable Familiar. Fixed an issue with Bolt Escape. They reduced the cost of Lightning Splash. Might actually be worth running this now that they've reduced the cost. Fixed issues with Overload. Templars reduced the cost of Spear Shards. Nova now has a Telegraph. Sacred Ground is a passive. No longer snares enemy, instead increases your block mitigation by 10% while standing in one of the mentioned abilities. So that'll be helpful for Templar tanks or additional mitigation there. Wardens, fixing issue with Leeching Vines. Winter's Embrace. The Glacial Presence passive now increases critical damage against enemies and critical healing against allies who have been recently affected by the Chilled Stats effect. So, let's go ahead and take a look at what Glacial Presence currently is. Glacial Presence increases chance of applying chill to enemies with Winter's Embrace abilities by 200%. So it probably is going to add in, you still have that increased chance to apply chill, but it also probably has something like increases critical damage done against chilled enemies by X%. So this should be a buff to, very least, Magical Wardens, probably not Stamina Wardens. Weapon abilities, fixed issues with Poison Arrow, where it would cancel any previously cast abilities. Reduce the cost of Volley. Reduce the cost of Wall of Elements. Reduce the cost of Blade Cloak. Fixed an issue with the bleed from Twin Blade and Blunt was not consistent with its proc condition. Battlefield Mobility. Passive now actually describes what it does. Life Giver, fixed an issue. Failed trigger events are required when applying a damage shield. Two-hander, Berserker Strike. Reduced damage done by Berserker Strike by 16%. So this is probably going to affect PvP, those of you guys who use PvP, two-handers in PvP. Your weapons fix an issue where the bleed was not consistent with its proc condition, okay. And then Dizzying Swing stuns enemies who are already off balance. Let's see, Unstoppable Brute. Cross reduction of CC break for this ability is now properly linked to the major resolve it grants and will increase in duration with bonuses such as Yorvolt's Guidance, but will be lost if a longer source of major resolve is applied. Vampire, Drain Essence to stun, now occurs when the cast completes. Werewolf, fixed issues where light and heavy attack weaving would cause desyncs with animations. Okay, just fixed a bunch of issues here. Meteor, Shooting Star will no longer add ultimate for hitting corpses. Won't be able to do Shooting Star spam anymore in Sunspire. This is probably like for blocking and stuff. Fix issues with Bone Surge and Trapping Webs. Again, these are just issue fixes, so we're just going to glance over them really quickly. Alliance War, they updated a couple of damage and scaling mods from Volendrug. So I'm not sure. I've never used Volendrung before, so Volendrug. So somebody who has, let me know whether these actually make sense. I do know you get new abilities, so it does seem like they're just increasing damage of these abilities, decreasing damage for certain abilities, etc. Not 100% certain what this all means because I don't really PvP enough to really know. Itemization. So they did say they're updating a lot of item sets, especially proc sets. But it updated a lot of sets that key off the actively holding blocks, which they're called bracing now. Okay. Consumables. It fixed an issue where poisons that dealt damage would inconsistently apply the poison status effect when compared to other damage over time effects. They will now all properly have a 3% chance to apply the status effect per tick. Fixed an issue where poisons would not use your highest crit strike chance. And this is a big one. I've made a kind of a clickbait video on this, but they fixed an issue where some poisons would proc effects that required a potion to be consumed. Okay, some item sets. It looks like a pretty long list here. Let's see, what are we doing on time? How are we doing on time? 27 minutes, alright, let's go blast through all these item sets here. Affliction, they just fixed an issue. Okay, will always apply disease status effect. Archmage properly triggers off resto heavy attacks. Ashen Grip no longer forces your character into animation. Fixed the issue where it wouldn't properly trigger. They removed the proc chance increased damage on activate to 5350. So that's a buff to Ashen Grip. So real quickly, let's see what Ashen Grip currently is. Ashen Grip, when you deal direct melee damage, you have a 10% chance to breathe fire to all enemies in front of you for 11-18 flame damage. This effect can occur once every 4 seconds. So this is still not going to be a great set because the bonuses are health, weapon damage, and weapon crit, and it deals flame damage, which is not scale off of any sort of stamina-based abilities. But it's still a buff, I guess. Rowan's Thunder, decrease in damage per tick here. Briarheart no longer has a hidden 1 second cooldown on the heal, but it's been nerfed to 378 to account for that. They increased weapon damage bonus to 450 from 449. Big deal. Increased the proc chance to 25%. Pretty good. They fixed an issue where Claw Yolacree wouldn't proc using Trifocus passive. That's the Ice Staff Heavy Attack. However, Alchemist increased the duration of the bonus to 20 seconds, and then they increased the bonus to 675 from 661. Curse Eater has an 8-second cooldown per target rather than overall cooldown. Increased the magic restore to 678 up from 600. Curse of Drolimesh works on Fear's targets, reduced the cooldown to 4 seconds, increased the damage done to 12,507. These aren't sets that you're typically going to see being used in PvE, so not really going to go over that too much. Let's see. Destructive Mage, that's explosion can now be triggered by any heavy attack. Reduce the cooldown of the application of the set to 4 seconds. They decrease the damage done to 6575 instead to account for the reduction in cooldown. But this should still end up being an overall buff to the damage that it applies. So for heavy attack builds, This should be a buff. So it's 750 normally, as is, but with this new one, it bumps it up to 1643. So this might be interesting for heavy attack builds, now that it procs off of your heavy attacks as well. So worth looking into for any sort of heavy attack Sork builds, perhaps. Fixed to Dune Reaper scale. Elf Bane, increased the duration bonus of the set to 5 seconds, up from 2 seconds. Mag DKs, might want to pick up some Elf Bane, because this also applies to Zon, so Zon's gonna get wickedly strong on Mag DKs if you're wearing Elf Bane. So looking forward to testing this out on a Mag DK. The Mag DKs might actually be stronger than some stamina DPS now with this change. I can see something like maybe Cyrodiil or False Gods with Elf Bane. That's going to be pretty nasty. Fix some issues with Engine Guardian. Essence Thief now procs off of light and heavy attacks. Eternal Hunt is considered direct damage, not damage over time now. Valerian's Revenge requires 5 stacks of triggers. Increased damage done to 9630. Applies 1 second cooldown to the stack of application. Ice Furnace no longer requires direct damage with a proc chance to trigger. Increased damage from 1644. Probably not going to be all that useful still for PvE. Ice Heart is now properly considered damage over time. Infallible Mage fixed an issue where the set's damage amp was not properly applying to all heavy attacks. Note that the Minor Vulnerability now follows its tooltips and requires a fully charged heavy attack to apply. Not sure what this means currently. Infallible Mage does apply its damage amp to all ticks of things like Wrestle Heavies and Lightning Heavies. So maybe it's implying that. Maybe it wasn't being applied to certain weapon heavy attacks. Well, guess we'll test it out when I do heavy attack builds. Infernal Guardian procs when you apply damage shield ability to yourself or an ally. Okay. Lucky's Focus now grants major evasion rather than a unique buff. They removed the healing reduction from this set. Reduced the penalty from AoE damage to 15 seconds, down from 15 seconds. Molag reduced the cost penalty of this set to 8%, down from 20%. This actually makes Molag pretty interesting because the weapon damage bonus you get from Molag weapon and spell damage, is actually pretty high. So if we pair this with False God, and a Breton perhaps on a Magicka DPS, this might end up being pretty decent. So another set to test out. We're only on the M's here. Morkulden, fixed a couple of issues here. Move the proc chance for Morkulden. Prisoner's Rags, fixed issues. Robes of the Hiss, fixed issues. Scathing Mage no longer considers the first tick of each damage over time as direct damage. No longer requires critical strikes to proc. Reduce the duration and cooldown to 5 seconds from 6 seconds. So it should be easier to proc now, but you still need to do direct damage. Probably still won't be as strong as some other proc sets, but it should be an overall buff to Scathing Mage. Sheer Venom, they increase the damage to 9660. And it will proc off of any tick of poison injections damage over time. Stormmaster, they increase damage for Stormmaster. Thews of the Harbinger now deals damage based on 6% of your max health rather than 4% of your current health. Again, not that big of a deal. Tormentor works with explosive charge now. Scoria fixed an issue where this set could proc off of other procs. Olorime doesn't proc off siege weapons anymore. Lycosa now reduces enemy spell and weapon power by up to 268 instead of applying major maim. They increase the duration to 8 seconds and reduce the cooldown to 12 seconds, so it's 8 on, 12, I guess it's 8 on, 4 off then if the cooldown's 12 seconds. So, the fact that it now is a unique debuff, or I should say an unnamed debuff, means you can sack this with major maim, so there should be an overall buff to Lycosa, generally speaking. Way of Fire, they just updated the tooltip. Wild Impulse, they fixed an issue where this set's damage over time could not stack for multiple players, so Huzzah! Groups with magic DPS, now multiple people can be running the Black Rose Prison Destruction Staff now for all that sweet AoE damage. War of the Queen's Arch fixed an issue where the snare would stack. Wrath of Imperium fixed an issue where the set would not properly grant its bonus to all 3 hits of Force Shock and its morphs. Okay, and that's pretty much it. Oh no, some more stuff here. Battlegrounds, you can only queue the solo player into Battlegrounds. That's because of pre-mades. People were cheesing Battleground achievements by using pre-mades. So, big change here for those of you guys who main BGs. For me, not big of a deal because I usually just queue in solo, but for those of you guys who like to play with friends, this is going to be quite a bit of a sting here. So make sure to leave feedback as to how they can do a better job of sort of get rid of people who cheese BG achievements. Art, animation, audio, combat, and gameplay. Some more things here, but it doesn't seem like there's anything too much here. Fixing an issue where objects between the camera and your character could be selected, rather than objects under the cursor between your character and in front of you. This will ultimately improve precision targeting while in third-person view. Okay. Crafting and economy, not much. Crown store, dungeons, probably just a bunch of dungeon changes here. Exploration and itemization, not much here. Housing, nothing that affects PvE. Miscellaneous activity finder stuff. Oh, okay, all that stuff. Alright, so that's pretty much it for these patch notes. So generally speaking, a couple of interesting set changes. Bane for mag decays, Molag for magical DPS in general. Not a lot of class changes, but then again, this wasn't advertised as a big combat change patch here. So again, I'll want to test out Bane. I'll want to test out Molag to improve the Molag. And a few of the new item sets do seem to be pretty interesting. In particular, I would be interested in taking a look at specifically Dragonkin's Grip, kind of see how that plays out here, as well as Aegis Collar, just kind of figure out exactly how that set works. And then Kjolnir's Nightmare, just to see how this stacks up with Zahn here. And then, of course, I will be doing some math with Unchained Aggressor to see how this plays out for Navitas hard mode, potentially for those of you guys who are responsible for time stops for Navitas. So those are kind of what I'm aiming to look at. Of course, the cost reduction to all the AoE dots means that rotations will change. Liquid Lightning or / Lightning Flood will probably be back on the table again. Sustain should improve overall, so we should be able to see quite a bit of rotational changes coming in here. But overall, probably not that big one in terms of DPS changes. No new sets really stand out to me, with the exception of Bane for mag decays, possibly more like Kina too. So we'll have to wait and see and test things out on the PTS. So link in the description below to the full patch notes, so you guys want to read that on your own time. You can certainly do so. Other than that, be on the lookout for more PTS coverage as we continue throughout the PTS cycle. That concludes this video. Hopefully you guys found this informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.